Hello, Disney fans. You know, I'm sorry to say it, but doesn't it feel like Disney's just run out of magic lately? It seems like all they ever make anymore are prequels, midquels, sequels, and live action remakes. And the few times they do have a really great original movie again, they immediately make 20 different sequels to it. And I was talking about this with my sister Rue the other day, and we both agreed that is so sad when there's a million great stories out there waiting to be told. And that got me thinking, if I worked for Disney, if I was someone in charge of finding stories for them to adapt, what stories would I pick? And that led to me making a list of my top 10 books that I think could be made into Disney movies. Now, with any top 10 list, there's going to be people who disagree. Some people might not like the order that they're in, might think that one of them is better than the other. Some might think that some of my choices wouldn't work with Disney at all. And others might say, hey, I have a really great story you might not have ever heard of that I think would be perfect for Disney. And if any of those are the case, please feel free to comment. I'd love the discussion of any ideas you have. Now, of course, since I'm going to be talking about these stories, there will be spoilers. You've been warned. And with that being said, I'd like to get on with the top 10 list itself. And I'm going to start with, of course, my number 10 pick, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I actually debated on whether to include this story on my list at all. Now, I love this book. It's the start of a great series. It's a wonderful story of, it's got romance, it's got your classic fairy tale elements, but it's also the first book in a series. And the other books I don't see being made into Disney movies as easily. They're great stories, but just not maybe what Disney would be looking for. Even the first story is extremely dark. It's got torture, it's got sex, it's got all kinds of things that basically not for kids. But it wouldn't be the first time that Disney took a definitely not for kids story and made it into a kids movie. So I'm still including it, but my other doubt with this story is this series is extremely popular, extremely well known, and with good reason. It is, like I said, it's a great story. And that means that the fans of it might not appreciate some of the changes that would have to be made. Maybe some will, maybe some won't. It depends on the reader and on the viewer, and how skillfully it's adapted. The story starts with it was inspired by Beauty and the Beast, but it's not a straight up retelling by any means. If you had never, been told it was a Beauty and the Beast adaptation, you would pick up on a few details, but you're not going to automatically think, oh, they're retelling Beauty and the Beast. It starts with a woman named Feyre who's out just trying to help her family survive. She's hunting one day when she ends up committing a terrible crime against the Fae. And as punishment, she's taken to the land of the Fae. Here she finds that they're all under a blight/curse. There's a lot that she knows she's not being told, a lot of secrets being kept. All of the Fae are forced to wear gold masks that were fused to their faces the night that they all attended a ball. She ends up slowly becoming closer with her captor, who's named Tamlin. Now, you can see here where the Beauty and the Beast comparison starts. Now, as she falls more and more in love with him, the blight on the Fae Kingdom grows closer and closer and threatens her world as well as the world of the Fae, and it becomes more and more obvious that she's seen as the key to breaking that. Now, I'm not going to give away any more spoilers with that. If you want to read this book, I definitely recommend checking it out. But It's up to you whether you think this could work as a Disney movie or not. Number 9 on my list is Merlin the Magical Fluff. Now, the book is about Gracie, who isn't a witch, but her cat Merlin is. Now, magical animal, that's Disney right there. And if anyone watching this owns a cat and they read the books and see what Merlin's like, they're going to be like, yes, that's a cat. That's what a cat would say if they could talk our language. That's exactly what this would be like. And that adds to the humor of it because it's so recognizable. Now, there are dark situations, but as I said before, Disney's worked with dark stories before and made them into great movies. It's it's a neat situation because a lot of the time she's covering up for Merlin because if she doesn't manage to keep his secret a secret, she spends eternity in a magical prison and they end up having to solve crimes together in order to clear her name, and it seems for a while like either the secret's going to get blown or she's going to be in trouble for a crime she didn't commit. There's there's a lot of comedic elements in this story as well as mysterious, and I really feel like it's ripe for adaptation. It's a trilogy of short stories by Molly Fitz, and I've read other books by her that are just as good. If you ever want to check out a good author, and if you like fantasy animal stories, I can really recommend her. If you like mystery, she's good at mystery too, which is included in the animal stories. But yeah, I definitely think that this trilogy could make a potential Disney movie. And that brings us to number 8 on our list. The Anansi stories are a collection of African folk tales about a trickster spider. I remember two of these stories especially from my childhood, and there are a lot of these stories that I've never even heard, and they cross various African cultures. And given that they're such old stories, and that some of them were developed in Africa and others in America after the slave trade, you could see why there's a wide variety of these stories. Now, in a lot of these stories, Anansi basically falls into his own trap, the way he did in one of the two stories I remember from my childhood, and that's Anansi and the Strange Moss Covered Rock, in which Anansi basically tricks all of the animals of the jungle into following him to where there's a magic rock that basically knocks them out while he goes and steals all their food. In the end, he's lured into his own trap. And that's one of the main elements of a lot of the Anansi stories where he like I said, he falls into his own trap, and it shows that it's good to be clever, but sometimes cleverness is knowing when to not be tricky. Now, there's also another Anansi story I remember that was told by Wishbone. I don't know how many of you remember the PBS series where a cute little dog tells stories from classic literature. And the story that was told in that show was how Anansi came to bestow wisdom on the world. In the beginning, he decides to steal all the wisdom in the world, or get it through trickery. One way or another, he's going to end up with all the wisdom.
The problem is there's too much loose wisdom. I need to get it all, so everyone will have to come to me.
This Anansi story ends with two children pointing out a mistake Anansi's making, which prevents him from climbing the tree where he plans to hide the wisdom. Realizing that even two little kids have more wisdom than he has, even with all the wisdom in the world, he understands wisdom is something to be shared and therefore distributes it. So you can see some Anansi stories end with him learning a lesson, others not so much. But either way, they're a great collection of stories. Now, they're all short stories, but it wouldn't be all that hard for Disney to string them together. Especially with a little bit of, they could make a device to frame all of them into one story, I'm sure. They've done it with other short stories like the Winnie the Pooh stories before, so I really think this could still work, even though the collection of stories is a bunch of short individual stories. Well, that brings us to number 7 on our list, Rikki Tikki Tavi. Rikki Tikki Tavi is a short story from the Jungle Book anthology by Rudyard Kipling. It's the story of a mongoose. Now, in case you're not familiar with what a mongoose is, they're animals that are a lot like a ferret or a weasel, and in India, they are sometimes kept as pets. This particular mongoose finds himself being a pet after he's nearly drowned in a flood but is saved by a family of humans. Of course, he comes to love them, especially their young son Teddy. The problem is, there's a pair of cobras who are out to get the humans because, for one thing, they figure if the humans are gone, Ricky probably won't stick around. And since since it's a mongoose's job basically to hunt cobras or any other snake, they really want Ricky out of there. For another thing, they figure if the humans are gone, their soon to hatch babies can have the run of the estate. Naturally, it's up to Ricky to save the day. Now, this already does have an animated adaptation. Chuck Jones made one in the 1970s. And although I couldn't find the whole video of it, I was able to get a little intro clip so you can have a general idea of what that looks like.
Adventure of an adorable and courageous mongoose who must fight the evil cobra to protect the family he loves.
Even though this has already been made into an animated version, so have a lot of other Disney shows. I mean, there are already animated versions of Beauty and the Beast, of Little Mermaid, of a whole bunch of other movies that Disney eventually made long before Disney ever gave them their own treatment. So I really don't see why this would have to mean that Disney can't use this. In fact, another story for the Jungle Book, Mowgli's Brothers, became the Disney version of the Jungle Book, so this isn't exactly unheard of. This to me, it's got your animal hero, it's your classic good versus evil story. To me, this has a lot of Disney potential. Now we're on to number 6, The White Seal. The White Seal is another short story from the Jungle Book anthology. I put this one a little higher on the list because, for one thing, I think there's a lot more room for expansion with this one than there was with Rikki Tikki, and I really love the theme of it. The hero of the story is Kotick. He starts life like any other baby seal, except his fur stays white instead of slowly turning to the usual seal brown. Now his father, Seacatch, thinks this is weird, but he's the only one to really make a big deal out of it. The other seals just treat Kotick like any other seal, and I think that's unusual for this kind of story. Usually, somebody marked as different from the beginning, they're seen as an outsider from the group. In this case, not so much. Although his color does come in handy on one occasion, and I'll get to that shortly. Like I said, he grows up like any other seal, and life is happy for him playing in the ocean and on the beach until the day hunters target his friends. Luckily, Kotick scares them off because they mistake him for a ghost. But he knows humans are going to come back, seals are going to be targeted again. He goes to the other seals and says, "Isn't there anything we can do about this? Can't we find a way to be safe from humans?" And the other seals look at him like, "Sorry, kid, this is life. Humans are always going to hunt us." Well, Kotick can't accept that, and he goes out to find an island where all seals can be safe from humans, where humans will never find them. This is another story that got the Chuck Jones treatment. And given what a taste we got in the cartoon of what this could be, you can imagine what a Disney version would look like.
Join the White Seal on his fantastic adventure across the seven seas in search of a magical island where all seals can be free.
This is one I can see either being traditional Disney animation style or potentially CGI like they did the remake of the Jungle Book. Either way, I mean, think of what they could do with this. They could expand on Kotick's adventures as he goes through the sea looking for this island. They could really do some great visuals with the ocean. I mean, think of what we see in movies like Little Mermaid or Moana, where we see ocean scenes. This could be a very visually beautiful movie. And besides that, I love the theme of you don't have to accept things that suck in this world. You can work to change that. A positive change is possible, and don't give up on that just because some people think that the world has to be this way. So I really think that not only would this be a fun movie for people to watch, but it has a great lesson at its heart. Wow, we're halfway through the list already. Up next at number 5 is Me and Katie, The Pest. Me and Katie, The Pest is a book by Anna Martin. If you're from my generation, you're probably most familiar with her as the author of The Babysitter's Club. When I was in grade school, the teacher took time out of each day to read to us, and this was one of the books she read. I loved it from the start. Now, with me, that's a given because it's a book about horses, and if you know me, you know I love horses. That's one of the reasons I don't want to go into too much detail about this yet. I want to take a more in depth look at it on my other channel, Of Course a Horse. But this is way more than just a horse story. The heart of it is a story about sisters and competition. The main character is Wendy, and she has a little sister named Katie who's perfect. You know, the kind of kid who takes every single extracurricular activity that they possibly can. They've won awards at everything. Wendy even comments that she's afraid that she's afraid that Katie's walls are going to come crashing down because of all the ribbons and trophies she's got on them. Wendy would love to be the best at something just for once. And she gets the idea, I love horses and Katie's terrified of horses. I can take riding lessons. I'll finally have my thing. And her parents willingly let her sign up. They're glad she found something she's passionate about. And she comes home after a great first lesson. The problem is, Katie's decided now she wants to take riding lessons too. What follows is a summer where the sisters continuously drive each other crazy, and that's one of the things that I love about this story is the way the relationship is. It feels so real because if you've ever seen any two siblings interact, you're like, yes, yep, that's them. It's clear that the two sisters do really love each other. At the same time, they can't stand each other. And they have to work through that relationship. And having to be in competition with each other directly in the same field, that brings out the worst in them. But it also brings out the best because there's moments where Katie genuinely wants Wendy to be happy. And I'm not going to say what happens that causes Wendy to be unhappy here. It's not a question of competition, but it's part of life with horses. Nothing too tragic, I promise, if you're going to read this book. But there's highs and lows in the relationship the way there are in any relationship. And by the end of the story, the two have come to see each other in a new light. I really can see this done in like a classic Disney live action kind of way, kind of in the same vein as The Parent Trap. And I really think that this is definitely one that Disney would have success with. Got the bond between sisters, horses, a good moral to the story. What's not to like? So now we come to number 4 on my list, Otter by Catherine Applegate. I actually came across this story on a list from Amazon. If you've ever done any of their Kindle challenges, they have different contests each month, different things you can do to win different bookmarks. And this was on one of those lists. And I kind of figured right away this would be a cute story, and it really is. It's written by Catherine Applegate, and if you're from my generation, you might know her better as K.A. Applegate, the author of the Animorphs series. That was pretty popular when I was a kid. But anyway, Otter is the story of an otter who's odd. Notice the spelling of the title. That's because as a baby, Otter was separated from her mother and ended up being raised by humans at the aquarium, which the otters refer to as high water. All the otters fear high water because a lot of times they know different sea creatures who end up there don't come back. Now, Otter isn't afraid of people because she was raised by humans, and after she's released, that's a big problem for her. She goes seeking out humans thinking they're all friends. She'll actually climb into a boat with humans. She doesn't have the fear that she would need to survive in the wild. She ends up getting hurt, not by humans, but trying to save another otter who's gotten into trouble through her being too bold and the other otter following her. After this, Otter has a real breakdown, I guess you could say, where she's depressed. She's like, what have I done? I've made a lot of mistakes here. And she gives up to the point where even though the other humans can't understand what's wrong with her, they figure, okay, given her history and given the way she's acting, she's never going to be able to be free. She can't survive in the wild on her own. This story has a bittersweet ending because although Otter will never be free again, the people at the aquarium learn from the mistakes that they made in trying to raise her and to release her. And that teaches them what they need to know to have better success with otters in the future. And she actually ends up helping to mother future orphan otters who come in. So, bittersweet ending there, and I can definitely see Disney making this one. It's another one I think could be made in like your old classic Disney style of live action movie. They'd probably have to CGI a lot of the water parts, a lot of the scenes with Otter being in the wild, but that's absolutely doable with technology today. It's a good story and it promotes conservation, which is always a good thing. Well, we are down now to the final three, and I have to say these last three were hard for me. In fact, the list kept giving me trouble over what order to put these stories in. But I finally settled on an order, and now getting down to the last three, two of them are adaptations of Rumpelstiltskin. And the first of these that I'm going to talk about is The Crimson Thread. The Crimson Thread is a very loose retelling of the story of Rumpelstiltskin. Now, I don't see that as being a problem per se because Disney's taken some pretty big creative license with other fairy tales that they've used. I mean, they changed The Little Mermaid to give it a happy ending. If you look at Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I know that's not really a fairy tale, but just giving it as an example, there's minimal similarities between that and the original novel. For good reason. If you've ever read the original novel, you see why that would not be a good Disney movie if it was left in original form. You look at Frozen, almost no resemblance to the original Snow Queen story. So, changing the story up a bit isn't why I don't think this should be higher on the list. The reason I don't put this story higher is it's not made into a fairy tale per se. This story it's a very loose retelling, as I said, and it's made to be more realistic, but I can see it being done where At some points, you're not sure whether magic is being done or whether the character is just that skilled. And I'll get to that in a moment. Now, if you know the original Rumpelstiltskin story, you know the Miller's daughter character who Rumpel helps out. In this version, she starts with the name Bridget, but ends up having to change it to Birdie. You see, Bridget and her family or Birdie and her family. I'm gonna stick with calling her Birdie because she goes by that for most of the story. So Birdie and her family come to America in the 1880s from Ireland, and they face a lot of prejudice that goes with that. And that's a theme that's still obviously highly current today, is the struggles immigrants face. And she and her family end up changing their names in order to sound more American. Well, the first person that she meets in America calls himself Ray Stalls. He's kind to her, talks to her in a friendly way, but there's something odd about him where he seems to be able to look into her very soul. Now, she's unnerved by this, and shortly after this, others warn her that there's something not right about Ray, and that Ray Stalls couldn't possibly be his real name. Now, even though that's something a lot of immigrants are doing in order to minimize the prejudice that they face, it still makes you wonder, okay, what is he hiding? Is he hiding something? Well, in spite of this, she's naturally intrigued by him, and he shows up multiple times seemingly out of nowhere when her family needs help. He's always helping her family, and at one point he even saves her little sister's life. Naturally, this leads to the two of them becoming good friends. Although it's clear that on Ray's end, he'd like it to be more. Now you might be wondering, okay, when does the actual Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale come into place here? Well, you see, Birdie and her father both end up working for J.P. Wellington, who is a major textile tycoon. His son has ordered a bunch of completely ugly, just about unusable cloth. And this is going to pretty much ruin the company because they can't return it for a refund, and they've used up their budget on cloth, so they can't buy more and just say, well, we'll just get rid of this. This is the cue for Birdie's father to say, oh, she is so skilled. She can take that cloth and make it into the most exquisite gowns the world has ever seen. Just give it to her and you'll never know what kind of cloth they started with. They're going to be perfect. Well, Birdie's good at making clothes, but not that good. However, she has to fulfill what her father claimed she could do because she and her father both work for the Wellington family. And if she doesn't succeed, they're going to lose their jobs and their homes. She's given one night to show what she can do with the cloth, and guess who shows up to help? Ray, of course. Now here's where the maybe magic, maybe mundane part comes in. He's able to actually take the cloth and rework it with gold threads that he got from the packing material, and even does, as in the original story, work in some straw. He uses crimson thread that was originally a gift he gave to Birdie, hence the title. It's the first thing that connects them. Doing this, he makes a gown that everybody is just going crazy over. And the fact that he did it all in one night, and that it turns out that good, and the way he re-wove the material, he completely unthreads the cloth and re-weaves it with the gold thread and the crimson thread. So it makes you wonder, is he doing magic or is he just that skilled? And I like that element of the story, and I think that could be played with a lot. Now, some misunderstandings result between Ray and Birdie, but it does end up happily for them, and there's a really great love story element to this. So I feel like this could be potentially a Pixar style movie. I don't see this so much as being animated, but I can definitely visualize this in the Pixar style. I feel like it's not necessarily screaming Disney, but I think there's the potential here to really, if you look at it and approach it the right way, this could be a great movie. Well, Now we're at number 2, which is which is another folk tale from another culture. I think it's time Disney worked with stories that weren't just European in origin. And the story that I think deserves the number 2 spot on my list is The Magic Paintbrush. The Magic Paintbrush is a Chinese folk tale. Now, this story goes way back, so there have been versions of it made already, but Disney hasn't gotten their hands on it yet, and I feel like there's a lot they could do with this. The story is about a young boy who's really a great artist, but he's too poor to even afford a decent paintbrush. Well, that changes when he's given the gift of a magic paintbrush, and anything he paints with this comes to life. Now, there's different versions of how he's given this gift. Like I said, this is an older story, so of course, different people have added and subtracted and changed different details throughout time. The version I like best is that he helped an elderly gentleman who turned out to have magic, and he's the one who gives him the gift of the brush. Now, since everything he paints with this brush can come to life, that gives a lot of potential for things he can do, and he uses that gift to help out his friends. Things are going great, he can paint toys for them, he can paint anything that his friends need. But there's an evil emperor who finds out about this gift, and he wants the boy to paint just for him. There's a lot of really clever ideas in the story of just how the paintings coming to life is used, but is a skill that the boy uses, is a gift that the boy uses, I should say. There's a lot of ingenuity there. And I can really well imagine how this would look in your traditional Disney 2D style. Which, by the way, why doesn't Disney make 2D movies anymore? Nothing wrong with 3D art with the Pixar style, but I absolutely love the 2D animation. And I think this is one that should be done that way. Now, I read this story when I was in grade school. I want to say 2nd or 3rd grade. But anyway, oddly enough, just after I got done reading this in school, there was an animated version of it on television, and so I was super excited to see that. Now, I happened to find this on YouTube. I don't know who made it. I just know it was made for television only, and I think it was only shown that once. But given the taste of what they did on just a made for TV budget, you can imagine what Disney could potentially do with this story. Magic paintbrush, I'll paint you beautiful things. Stars and moonbeams, birds with silvery wings. Unicycles to ride on, unicycles that lead. My magic paintbrush, I'll paint you a dream. I know the video quality in that particular clip isn't that great, but it gives you a rough idea, and if this could be this good made for a it's just a made for TV version, can you imagine what Disney could potentially do with this? I mean, I don't understand why this story hasn't already been a Disney movie, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if this is a Disney movie in the future. We've reached the last story on our list now. And as I said, I'd have 2 versions of Rumpelstiltskin on this list. And the final one is Spinner by Tabby Card. If Disney ever wants to make a fairy tale version of Rumpelstiltskin that's close to the original but still has its own unique spin, they should take a look at this story. It starts out the way we all know from the fairy tale. The miller brags that his daughter can spin straw into gold, which of course she can't. The king locks the miller's daughter in a tower filled with straw and says, "You're going to spin all of this into gold by morning or else." Rumpel shows up, spins all of the straw into gold for her, asks for payment for the magic. Spinning goes on for 3 nights. But now here's where the story differs. In the original, there were 3 nights of spinning. In this version, the king is way too greedy to be happy with just 3 nights worth of spinning. He wants the miller's daughter, who's called Greta in this version, to continue to spin night after night after night, which of course means Rumpel has to keep showing up to keep helping her. This leads to more of a chance for conversation between the two of them. Greta gets to know him and feel for him when she realizes that he's just as much a prisoner in this situation as she is. The magic actually binds him to continue to do this for her. He's in a magical contract that her father actually made. Now, when she starts to come to care for him and he realizes she notices that he's trapped too, he starts to care back and the two gradually fall in love. There's one especially beautiful scene that I would love Disney to make in the traditional animated version, in a traditional animated style. And that's where Rumpel asks her if she wants to see magic. Not the result of the magic, but the magic itself. And the way that's described would be perfect in any kind of Disney movie. There's a karmic ending for the king, who is the real villain in this story. His punishment in the end is not too much or too little given the crimes he's committed. There's a great love story and a neat twist on the guess my name in 3 nights idea. She has to guess Rumpel's name. Well, I call him Rumpel, but he's given a different name in this version. But she has to guess his name in 3 nights in order to free him so he can use his magic to get both himself and her out of there. Like I said, there's enough of a twist. It's got romance, it's got magic based on a fairy tale. This is Disney. I'm really surprised actually that Disney hasn't ever used Rumpelstiltskin before. They did kind of ish, if you count Once Upon a Time as being true Disney, although it's made by ABC rather than Disney themselves, but Disney owns ABC. But actually, if you like Once Upon a Time and you ever read this book, I think you'll find that they used a lot of ideas about that character from Once Upon a Time in this version. Rumpel walks with a limp, and he constantly reminds others, and they need to be reminded, that all magic comes with a price. That's magic's rule, not his. But the way that they use that idea in there, I really think that Tabby Card was inspired by that when she wrote this story. So there is my list of top 10 stories that I think Disney should take a look at. As I said before, I'd love to see your opinions in the comments and what you think of these. Which ones you think would be really great, which ones maybe you don't like, any other ideas you have. I look forward to reading them. I'll see you in the next video, and until next time, remember the magic.